In Ward 5, the cells, or the outer cell, didn't have a roof. It was just iron bars. And when I first got there in March, the weather had changed and it was beautiful. So for some time, I used to sleep outside at night. I'd get me fatter, my bed, lay it outside in the outer cell, if you like, and just look up at the stars. And it was wonderful. And when full moon came, oh man, it wasn't like being in jail. You know, just to sleep out under the stars was, I'd never done this before, you know, ever. And there was many, many things I recall that I would be saying to myself, yeah, I wouldn't see this in England, or I wouldn't do this in England. And it was one of the many benefits, you know, that I experienced. Anyway, in October, my nephews Ted and Lee came, brought me loads of stuff, clothes, books. They got bringing fruit in from the outside. And the time to change that I'd written was finished. I give this to Ted. And eventually, Denny, his wife, she got it all typed up properly and put onto this website. But like I said in a previous video, it never came to anything. And that's how it was. Moving on, just for a moment, regarding time to change, when I was out of jail, and I was living in Birmingham, I rewrote it, or I typed it all up, and I sent it to a publisher. And the feedback I got back was, yeah, it's very good. Unfortunately, nobody can verify what you've said. And I thought, well, it's not about being verified. I wrote this so people can read it to get benefit. People in Tihar got benefit from this time to change that I'd written. I would sit down with some people and I would talk to them. I would take out a chapter, maybe on detachment, for example, and talk about detachment as against attachment and explain the benefits of being detached. Because at that time, and as I am now, that's how it was. I was completely detached and never come to anything. I'm still thinking about trying to get it published. I don't know. I will have to see. I still believe that it can give people a lot of benefit if they're ready to take it. And that's all I can say on time to change. Also in October, Mick, the foreigner that got transferred from CJ4 back to CJ3, went to court. And he'd been on remand for just over 7 years. And they found him guilty and gave him a 10-year sentence. This guy was HIV, he had spinal TB, and he was devastated. We were all devastated, you know. I mean, it just... At the same time, when this guy was getting convicted, 3 Nepalese guys were convicted of gang raping a 3-year-old kid. And they were told that they would get parole within 4 years. That's how the justice system worked in India. No. No, that's bollocks. It's all bollocks. Anyway, on the 1st of November 2006, I was back in court. I'd had a 3-month date previous, and by this time I was really pissed off. I'd been on remand for over 3.5 years. I had 15 witnesses against me. These were like customs people and Christ knows who else. and not one of them had been to court yet. So anyway, this day I went to court, and I met Lando and Lenny. I hadn't seen him since I'd left CJ4. And it was nice, it was great. We talked and caught up on many things. And I hadn't said anything to anybody about what my plan was. Eventually, I went into the courthouse, and I looked at the judge and I said, "May I speak?" And the judge looked at me and he just nodded. I said, "Please find me guilty and end this story." And he looked at me and he was quite sad. He said, "You want guilty?" I said, "Yes, sir. I want to finish this story." And he said, "I can only give you the minimum, which is 10 years rigorous imprisonment and 2 lakh rupee fine. That's 200,000 rupees, I don't know, 2.5 grand, £3,000, I can't remember." And when he said this, I can remember my sort of balls went up into my belly a bit, I just sort of like twitched and thought, what the fuck have I done? Anyway, he said, "Come back tomorrow and you'll have your judgment." Now, the reason I did this was the fact that I didn't know what was going on in my life, and it had dragged on and on for years. And at that time, Britain and India had ratified an agreement to transfer prisoners based on certain criteria, And as long as you fitted the criteria, you could get a transfer. So this is what I was banking on at the time. Anyway, I goes back the next day. I eventually get my judgment, and then I'm taken into a room, and I have loads of fingerprints taken, and then I'm taken outside, and I have to hold a placard up. Can't remember what was on the placard. And there was a photographer there taking pictures. And by the time this happened, there was a group of people all around me, 20 people at least, just watching and checking out what the score was. After that, I get back on the prison bus for the last time. That in itself was for me a benefit, because this bus was like being in a coffin, a steel coffin, and every trip was a nightmare. So that ended, No more sitting in a lockup for 7 hours, waiting to go to the court for the judge not to be there or the advocate not to be. All that had finished. So that in itself was a benefit for me. When I got back to Tihar and I walked into the Dodi, the main entrance, TSB, Tamil Special Police, and ordinary officers in the jail were coming up to me and saying, "Stephen, convict, eh?" And they were like so happy that I was made a convict. I thought, what the fuck's going on? I'm a convict, man. But in Tihar, when you're a convict, your status goes up. When you're on remand, you're a nobody, you're a nothing. But as a convict, you have some kind of status. So I was waiting to go back to my ward, and said, no, you have to see superintendent. I said, okay. So I goes into the superintendent's office, and he said, "Stefan, you are now convict?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You will be transferred to the convict ward." And I lost the plot. I says, "I'm not going back to the convict ward." Now, all convicts in CJ3, you have to go to the convict ward, and at some point they'll transfer you from there to Central Jail number 2, which is the workhouse, if you like. And he said, "You have to go to the convict ward." I said, "You put me in the convict ward and I'll fucking kill somebody." I said, "I spent a year in the convict ward, I know what it's like, and I'm not going into the convict ward." I said, "You can beat me, I'm not going into the convict ward." There was one foreigner that worked in the Dodi. He was working on computers and whatever, and I knew this man very well. And he was in the room when all this was going on, and he took me by the arm. He said, "Steve, come outside." So I went outside, stood in the corridor, and I don't know what this guy had said to the superintendent, but he came out. He said, you can have a cell in the hospital in Barra cell. Barra being 12, and there was 12 cells, just 12 cells. These were mainly for HIV patients, and one cell was kept for people with chicken pox. He said, I can get you a cell in there. And I said, yeah, man, that'll be great. So I goes to Ward 5, I sees TMB, tells him what's happened, blah, blah, blah. And I says, look, I'm being transferred and I'm in the hospital. And that night, I get to the hospital ward, down to where Baracel was. And Mick was there, the one that was found guilty. And I was in the cell next to Mick. Also there was Toto, that I'd met years ago when I was transferred into Ward 2, and we had a good connection. And that night when I got there, he came up and he went, Steve, can you channel Reiki to all of Baracel, to the 12 cells? I said, yeah, you know. He said, well, we've been having Talashis every day, searches every day, and people getting beat. And he said, it's been horrible. He said, there is too much tension here. I said, okay. And that night, when I got into my cell, I channeled Reiki to Baracel, using what they call distant healing, for want of a better word. And the next day, there was no Talashi, or the day after, or the day after. And all that week, there was no searches. And he came up to me and he said, it worked. I said, well, it's the power of Reiki, like. And yes, we did have Talashis occasionally from that point onwards, but not that many. And it brought a calmness to everybody. And it was very much appreciated. Yeah, when I got back to jail and, I was given this convict status. And because I was in the hospital and I was in Baracel, I was then allowed 1 pack of butter a week, butter for Christ's sakes. I had butter and fresh fruit once a week, bananas, apples, whatever. And also a litre of milk every morning, a hot litre of milk. Okay, the milk was watered down because they cheat. And in the hospital, they had their own kitchen, and this is where the milk was boiled up and whatever. But every morning, I'd have a litre of hot milk. By this time, of course, I had some money in my account. I got Nescafe coffee. So every morning, I would still get a 2-litre jug of tea. I'd have a couple of cups of tea, and then a bit later on, I would have milky coffee. And all I can say is, I was living the life of luxury in my mindset. Nothing had changed in Tihar. Everything was exactly the same as it was when I first went into Tihar. But in my mindset, everything had changed. And just having these few luxuries, I was so happy and content. By this time, I was very much into using the pendulum, and my nephews brought me a book on pendulum and how to go about using it and whatever. And it said, if you can use this pendulum for 15 minutes a day, within about a year, you can get 70 to 80% positive results. And I was using the pendulum for maybe 3 or 4 hours a day, every day. And it was like an obsession. I become quite obsessed with this and some of the stuff that come out. You wouldn't believe me. You wouldn't believe me. I'll give you an example. This guy came to my cell this day, and him and another man that were connected, they were going to court. They'd been in jail for years. And he wanted to know if they were going to get bail. And I says, fucking hell, you know the chances of getting bail. And you're a foreigner. You're not a Westerner. You're from Asia or wherever. I said, but okay, I didn't like to ask questions about the future with the pendulum, but on this occasion I did. So I did my thing, and I said, look, this guy, he'll get his bail. I said, you won't. He said, I won't? I went, no. And sure enough, the next week they went to court, and this one man, he got his bail, the other one didn't. That's how it was. Anyway, done 15 minutes, that's good enough. Next time, give me the thumbs up, as usual, for this algorithm of YouTube, whatever it is, and a like and a subscribe and share it and comment, please. I'm not getting no bloody comments, man. Somebody talk to me. I'm getting one comment from Danny Boy, who is the TNB. He sends me a couple of comments. Nobody else has given me a comment. I want to know whether you like it, whether you don't. Anything, please. Do the needful for me. Next time.